Do you get arm pump at some tracks and not at other tracks? I'm going to explain exactly why, but the first thing that you need to understand is what arm pump is, what creates arm pump or gives you arm pump, and then you'll understand why you get it at some tracks and not at other tracks, or in some riding conditions and not other riding conditions. So the first thing is, what is arm pump? So arm pump is when the muscles in your arms are overworked. Okay, they've blown up, they've expanded. It's just like any other muscle group. Okay, like if you go to the gym and do lots of squats, the first squats start off easy, and then as you keep going and going and going and going and going, if you don't give yourself a rest, your legs will start to feel like they're blowing up, they're exploding, and they lose all of their strength and they lose all of their power. And a weight that was light in the first few reps now becomes very heavy and challenging for you to be able to move. It's exactly the same for your forearms. Your forearms are just like any other muscle group. So there's a lot of stuff out there like supplements or surgery and things like that. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is these muscles are being overworked. Okay, that is all of the solutions that are out there are trying to prevent these muscles from being overworked, whether that's through surgery, through having supplements, through special diets, through special exercises. What we're trying to do is stop these muscles from being overworked. You have to understand that. That is the thing that we're trying to solve. Just like any other muscle group in the body, when it's overworked and overused, you get the same experience, the same feeling as what you get in your forearms when they're overworked. So, now that we've got that out of the way, there's two types of arm pump. So there's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 arm pump is where you get arm pump at the start of a ride, and it gets better as you keep riding. So it's at its worst at the start, and then as you keep riding, it gets better and it starts to go away. Type 2 arm pump is the opposite. That's where you start off with like no arm pump or limited arm pump, and then the more you ride, the longer you ride, the more arm pump you get, and the worse it gets the longer you keep riding until you have a break. So first of all, you've got to know which type of arm pump you've got. If you've got type 1 arm pump, the problem is that you're probably not warming up properly. Okay, so that's one part of the problem is when you've got cold muscles are weak muscles. They don't contract and relax very well. So in order for our body to have strength, the muscles need to be able to contract and relax. And that gives us optimal strength. And that optimal strength comes when our body temperature and muscles are warm. That's why we do a warm-up when we go into the gym. If you've ever been into the gym or done exercise and no warm-up, you know what it feels like. Like your body's very stiff and sore and rigid and you don't feel very strong. That's because the muscles aren't warm, aren't contracting and relaxing very well, which means you don't have the level of strength and performance that your body should have. So often what happens is when we go into the gym, we warm up, all right? We go and we say, oh, we're going to do squats today. And we're going to do our squats with 80 kilos. But you don't just chuck 80 kilos on the bar. You might do a few reps with an empty bar, then you do a few reps with 40 kilos, a few reps with 60, maybe one at 70, and then you do your working sets. You don't just run straight into the gym and just start banging out 80 kilos as soon as you've hopped out of the car. But when we go and race, we don't even think about that. So you got to think about your bike. Your bike might weigh 110 kilos. If you weigh 80 kilos, you've got a 110 kilo bike, plus you've got your 80 kilos on top of that. So you're wrestling around 190 kilos for however long your races are. So what happens for most of us, and I was guilty of this when we were riding and racing as well, is you sit in the car for half an hour, however long it takes you to get to the track, and you're sitting around, not doing too much in the morning waiting to go race, and then you're expecting your body to go from 0 to 100% straight away, to wrestling around 190 kilos. And you're going to feel shit. You're going to feel terrible. So that's the first thing, is making sure that you're warmed up. The second thing is discomfort, which can come from not being warmed up. So what I mean by discomfort is if you're riding in conditions that you're not comfortable riding in, you will overgrip the bike. You will hold on for dear life because you're not relaxed. You don't feel comfortable. It's just a natural reaction from our body. When we feel unsafe, we hold on to things a lot tighter. If you're driving the car really, really fast, okay, you hold on to the steering wheel tighter compared to driving around at 40 kilometers an hour. Think about like when you're overtaking a car. Probably overtook some cars on the way to the track, right? When you're doing 40 kilometers an hour, you're like driving with no hand, hand up on the side of the car. If you're overtaking a big truck and you've got to go a bit faster, you put both hands on the steering wheel and you take it a bit more seriously. And that's because there's a bit more stress, there's a bit more pressure, there's a bit more discomfort there when things are a bit harder. So it's the same with riding. When you first start going ride, if you get on the bike and you don't feel comfortable on the bike, or maybe you haven't been on the bike for a week and then you're getting back on for the first time, there's those initial nerves of just getting back on the bike, getting comfortable with everything. Maybe it's the riding conditions that you're riding in, you're not used to. Your body is very tense and rigid. And then once you start to ride a little bit more and relax, that's when things start to get a little bit easier. You don't grip on as tight, your body's warmer, and everything just flows a little bit better. Type 2 arm pump. Okay, so when things get worse at the end of the ride, there's 5 different causes, 5 buckets that we've got to dissect. So again, we're trying to dissect the problem of my forearms are being overworked. Why are they being overworked? Okay, so far we've discovered they can be overworked from not being warm, and they can be overworked from you gripping too tightly on the bike, okay, and working them too hard, not being relaxed because of the conditions. So for type 2, we've got 5 buckets. The first one is strength. So if you're not strong enough on the bike, what will happen is you won't ride the bike how you should be riding the bike. So all of those things that you've learnt skill-wise, all the things you know you should do, grip with your legs, do this, do that, keep your elbows up, you stop doing all that stuff. And when you stop using your legs to be able to ride the bike and the big powerhouse muscles, what happens is the little muscles have to take over and do the work. And they become the ones on the handlebars. So instead of you being on the bike and your legs doing most of the work and your core doing the work and your upper body doing the work, what starts to happen is your arms and forearms your hands are just hanging on for dear life. Because your hands are hanging on for dear life, your forearms are connected to your hands. They control your fingers and arms moving. Then they start to get overworked because now instead of, like if you look at the size of your legs and look at the size of your arms, which muscles are the biggest, stronger ones? Obviously your legs. So you've got a job that your legs should be doing being taken over by your arms. And that's why they start to get overworked. So in this scenario, you need to be able to get yourself stronger, okay? Because the way that you get yourself, the stronger you get yourself, the lighter you can make the bike feel. The lighter you can make the bike feel, the less energy you'll use when you're riding and racing. So the less energy you use when you're riding and racing, because we're getting your legs and everything else working, means the less work that your arms are going to do. So we want to have 80% of your body, this part of your body, doing most of the work. Your arms should be doing 20% of the load, or taking 20% of the load. But if your legs and core and everything else is giving out and it's not strong enough and it doesn't have the endurance, then it's not going to do 80%. Might do 50%. But that other 50%'s got to be made up somewhere, and that's going to be made up through your forearms. So get yourself stronger. Second area is the cardio and conditioning, which is similar. Like if you're starting to get out of breath and you're not getting enough oxygen to your muscles are going to run out of energy. They're going to lose their endurance. All that strength you've got, you're not going to be able to use and demonstrate. And so same thing again. You're not able to ride the bike how you know you should be riding. The major muscle groups that should be doing a lot of the work don't do much of the work, and then your forearms are doing more, overworked. Third one, nutrition. Same deal. So if you're doing, say, an enduro race and you get an hour into the race and your body runs out of carbs and you haven't been carb loading properly, same thing. You lose energy. Your legs don't have the strength to stand up as much. You're not focused as much. You're not picking lines that are as good. And because you're not doing those things, you're probably making it harder to ride the bike and using more energy rather than using less energy. So again, same thing. Like if you run out of energy and you feel like shit, your body's not gripping onto the bike how it should be, which means that your arms start to do more of the work, the rest of your body does less, and your arms get overworked. So think about these muscles, right? Like they're not big muscles. They're not strong muscles. They're not powerhouse muscles. These muscles here are not designed to throw around 190 kilos for a 20-minute motocross race or for a 3-hour enduro. Like look at the size of them. Okay, you can just look at them. You don't even need to have any education. You can just look at the size of the muscle and go, all right, these forearm muscles here are tiny. Look at the size of my legs. My legs are like this big compared to my forearms. Let's get the bigger muscle groups doing most of the work. The fourth area is mobility. So this is the one that a lot of companies out there try and sell you shit on when it comes to like arm pump devices and arm pump stretchers and crap like that. And it drives me nuts because people get suckered into it, like they get suckered into the Ab King Pro thinking they're going to get abs by using a funny looking machine. It doesn't work like that, okay? The only way that mobility or stretching will help alleviate arm pump is if you have really, really tight forearms, which could be from like, maybe you're like a bricklayer and you grab bricks all day and these muscles get really, really tight. Then you can just stretch them out, but you can do simple stretch. You don't need a fancy device. You can do simple stretches or get some massage for your forearms to help to loosen them up. The other way that arm pump can be a problem is if you get it more in one side than the other. Often what can be the cause of that is having a previous injury. So if you've had a previous injury where you had like a broken hand or broken arm or something on that side, and you've got one that gets a lot more arm pump than the other, it's probably because all of these muscles in here, in your forearms and in your hands are really, really tight and stiff. So you just need to get them loosened up and mobile, and then be able to get them stronger again with some strength training. Number 5 is comfort on the bike. So if you're uncomfortable on the bike, which comes back to what we talked about for type 1 arm pump, if you're uncomfortable on the bike, what will happen is you will hold on for dear life. You will over grip it. You will over tighten, okay, your grip that you have on the bike. Everything will be a death grip and very stiff. You can tell, like when you look at a rider and you go, oh, that rider looks very smooth. They don't look like they're using much effort. And then sometimes you see riders and you're like, shit, like they're very stiff, very rigid. They get jammed up a lot. They're not flowing and moving around on the bike. And so that comes down to making sure that you're comfortable on the bike. So that can be a few things that contribute to that. It can be skills. So I know for me, when I was racing, I never really got arm pump, but there was 2 times I can remember getting arm pump. There was one time I remember at Byford, which was a very hard pack track, but I used to ride a lot there, but it had been raining and it was really, really muddy. And we never rode in rain or mud, apart from race day. If it was practicing if we're going practicing and it was raining, probably wouldn't go to a gravel or hard pack track anyway. Probably go to sand track because it's easier to clean up and better riding. So I remember going to Byford and racing there, and because it was so skatey, I wasn't used to riding the bike like that. So I was just holding on for dear life. I was holding on really, really tight onto the handlebars because I was so scared the front end was just going to wash out all the time. The other time I got arm pump was at Mafra Junior Nationals. And so here in WA, when I was racing, we have a lot of like sand tracks and hard pack tracks, but we don't get too many like deep ruts. Like over east, you guys have a lot of ruts. Like you come into a corner and it's like 20 different ruts. We never really got that here in WA when I was racing. So riding in ruts wasn't really something I was comfortable with. When I raced in Mafra at the Junior Nationals, there was shit tons of ruts and really, really long ruts, like where you start the rut here and it finishes over here on the other side of the corner, and you've got to make sure you pick the right one on the way in to have the right one on the way out, and that's just not something I was used to. And I remember my forearms being so sore. We were like putting Denk rub on them, trying to massage them, trying to stretch them, because even after I was racing, my forearms were just so sore from hanging on. But I'd never had anything like that for the whole time I've been racing. And that's purely just because I was really uncomfortable in the conditions that I was riding in, because I wasn't used to riding them. If I got comfortable in them and I rode those ruts all the time, it'd be like all the other tracks and I'd feel fine. The muscles wouldn't be overworked. The other thing that contributes is bike setup. So if you're 80 kilos and you're riding a bike that's set up for a 100 kilo rider, then it's probably going to be very stiff and very rigid and jar you all the time, and you're going to feel like the front end's going to wash out and you're not going to be able to turn properly, and it's going to be doing all the stuff you don't want it to do. So when the bike is reacting in a way that you feel like it's going to kill you, you're going to hold on a lot tighter. You're going to be a lot more rigid. You're not going to ride as fast. And that's just a safety mechanism that your body has. It's just a natural tendency. When you don't feel comfortable on the bike, you tense up. And you hear it from the pros all the time. Like, they're pretty fit guys, especially if they're racing for a living, but they still do get arm pump. How does that happen? Well, if they're doing all of the other stuff correctly, usually it's they don't feel comfortable on the bike. They either don't feel comfortable with the track conditions, or they don't feel comfortable with how the bike's set up, or a bit of both. But you've got to make sure you've got those other things dialed in. Jet Lawrence was just saying on the weekend for Parla for the first round of the Pro Motocross. He won both races. However, his bike wasn't set up properly. His bike was kicking around and not doing what he wanted it to do. And so he mentioned in his post-race press conference that he had to use his strength and use his body a bit more to counteract the suspension not performing how he wanted it to perform. He didn't come in from the race going, oh yeah, I finished up 30th because the suspension wasn't like 100% bang on. It's never going to be bang on. The suspension, like, you can get it to a certain point, but it's never going to be perfect. That's motocross. If you want something where you're going to have a perfect setup, then maybe go and take up drag racing where there's no corners and the surface is the same all the way through. So it just comes down to making sure that you have ticked the boxes for those things. So to come back to the initial question, why do you get arm pump on some tracks and not on others? Some tracks maybe make you more uncomfortable than other tracks. Okay, so like for me, the muddy conditions gave me arm pump, but the sand track didn't give me arm pump. Deep ruts gave me arm pump, but other tracks didn't give me arm pump. So I need to work on my skills. It can be bike setup. Like I've had bikes where you had like the front ends like getting head shake and wobbling all over the place. Like that's going to give you arm pump because you're going to be holding on for dear life because you don't want to crash. The other thing that can give you arm pump on some tracks and not others is some tracks might wear you out more than others. So maybe you are good on hard pack and you love that stuff, but then when it comes to deep sand tracks, you get arm pump because it's really physical and you get worn out and you get fatigued and you're low on energy and you start to not ride the bike how you need to ride it, and so your arms get overworked. So again, everything comes back to your arm pump being overworked. It's just you have to be able to find out what's causing them to be overworked so you can fix the right thing.